All right, start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. And I'm your host, Ben, and this is your week, I guess, 17 through 20 or 19 EPL review show. We've reached the halfway mark now, and I kind of figured I'd do maybe a halfway kind of review show instead of the usual. So back after the festive period, I was a little bit on a break. I figured the games are just going on way too quick to do a pod between every few days. We do a script, and then all of a sudden, everything I said, for the first, for that week's fixtures would be just kind of irrelevant. Just a couple days later, so I just figured it was just too much going on. So I kind of did this last year, and I thought it actually went pretty well. So I'm gonna do something similar. So basically, I'm going to, instead of kind of micro analyzing or just kind of going over small details between these three or four games that these teams had, what I'm going to do is take a basically a more of a broad look on how teams performed from this period. It's actually going to be easier for me that way. I don't have to remember nearly as much. It's also good to kind of do that too in between things, because that you become less reactionary, and you can wait to see if certain themes emerge. And I think we did kind of see that with a few teams. Arsenal is going to be one that I'm going to definitely highlight. And speaking of, it's good to not necessarily be reactionary. If I had been doing a pod after the way Man United performed in that second half versus Aston Villa, there would have been some cringe moments there. Uh, but then again, no Rasmus Højlund, that maybe played a role, but also that's just been Man United. They can be they can show that they can still be a team that can do that, because that is a good Aston Villa side. They were missing a couple players in that game as well, and maybe that showed up a little bit. But they had the 2-goal lead, that'll probably be a game that I focus on a little bit as well. But I'm also in a pretty good mood because at Christmas time, Liverpool were not at top of the table, and now they are. Though Man City is getting Kevin De Bruyne back, and so I still think it's not necessarily done and dusted. Also, the player that's responsible for like all their goals, Mohamed Salah, is now away. He is left to join Egypt for Africa Cup of Nations, and I remember this 2 years ago. I thought this was really going to be a downer because it was just Salah. It was Salah and Mane 2 years ago, and Liverpool were actually able to somewhat survive, and we saw Mane turn around and have a really good second half of the season after that. But we saw Salah come back, and his form really did dip. He didn't necessarily get injured, but his legs were completely drained, and I do fear that potentially happens again, whether or not it's an injury or not. So there is going to be Liverpool have lived off him to start this first half of the season. They're going to have to find a way to get some production from others, and one of the key ones is going to be Diego Jota, who has since returned, and not only returned, he's scored again. And that is just what he does. So, what I'm going to do is basically, like I said, we're gonna do just look at how each team performed. I don't necessarily like last year when I did this, it was way too long. So we actually had to split it up into basically two shows. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case again, but I think that's probably what I'll do. So what I'm thinking of doing is do like the top four, or, people competing for the top four spot. Maybe people competing for Europe, and then maybe like the three or four teams that I don't necessarily think are in danger of relegation, but don't really think they're going to be in a spot for Europe, and that's going to be a theme in those three teams as well, because I was really down on all three, and Wolves, Fulham, and Bournemouth coming into the season. And all three have really made me just look quite foolish, uh, because I this was before Wolves hired Gary O'Neill, because I knew they were losing Lopetegui, and Wolves were one of the really weaker sides to end the season last year. So you're worried about them. You didn't know what Bournemouth were going to do. Losing Gary O'Neill, hiring Areola to come in. I was a little worried about them because of the form in October, and it's a good thing they didn't listen to someone like me. I mean, I'm Mr. Nobody, anyways. But I did a show with my buddy Jeremy around that time, mid October, and I was kind of fearing he might be the first one to go, because you looked at how 'cause they were close to last in the table at that point, and you just look at the roster and you're like, it shouldn't be this case. And now you've really started to see that come to fruition. They've had a fantastic November and December, and really good for them. Really good for them to stick with their manager. Really good for them to just go out and pick him out. It was a unique hire when they did it. So maybe the people running Bournemouth behind the scenes really know what they're doing. So credit to them. And then Fulham. For some reason, I keep wanting to doubt Marcus Silva, and in a similar manner, they've turned around. And what's funny is they had Jimenez and they were flying, and then they lost him with that red card. And then after that, they went 3 or 4 games with, really, struggling to score and kinda getting blown out in some of those games. I think they even lost to Burnley, for one of them, and then they get him back, and poor Arsenal, they had to play, Fulham basically at full strength, and man, did that really show up. They looked fantastic. Uh, it's not necessarily good for us too because I think they've been better since Calvin Bassey has been moved to that kind of left-sided, center back spot, which is where Tim Ream used to play. And the way Calvin Bassey is performing and Tosin has come in to be on that right side, they look significantly better than they did to start the season. And I don't know how Tim Ream's going to get into the side now, unfortunately for us. But that is just from a U.S. perspective. I can't say that he should play over the way Bassey has performed. And Bassey was struggling a little bit when he was forced to play on that left side for that right hand side. And now he's back on his stronger foot. And man, did he put in some really well timed challenges to help Anthony Robinson with Saka, and that was a very impressive Fulham performance. I was not expecting that at all, especially as Arsenal looked. They had the down game versus West Ham, but they looked really good. They had like 33 shots that game. They did not look like that versus Fulham. They had majority of the possession and whatnot, but not many touches in the Fulham penalty area. And I think they only had 13 or 15 shots total, and not many on target. So when I get to Arsenal, I will spend a lot of time really on that game because that performance to me seems to symbolize a little bit more of where Arsenal are than necessarily the West Ham game where they have 30 shots and if they just had a striker, they could finish them all. I don't think that's the case for Arsenal. That can be the case for Chelsea. When you look at where maybe they need to go as far as getting a striker because Chelsea I think are up there with Liverpool and Newcastle for creating the most big chances in the league. Uh, but anyways, so what I'll do is I'll kind of what I normally do, leading off, and then talk a little bit about a theme that I saw during Christmas as well. So basically, it was unfortunate that a lot of you have to spend a little time on VAR because that is just where we are. VAR is taking away too many good goals, in my opinion. They're not just reversing howlers; they're just really micro targeting every minute detail. I keep like using words to say small. And they're just to me they're re-reffing games, and I thought that's not what they were supposed to do. I don't want people to feel vindicated for being like, I was right all the time. I didn't want VAR, and it's ruined. No, no, no. Because it's not like it was good before either. I just think they're using it wrong. No one knows what a handball is. You hear the word handball, and I think they even said this in the Liverpool game. It's like arm or sleeve ball now. Uh, and, because you imagine handball would be like someone, like, deliberately using their hand, not something hitting, like, the elbow. Uh, so that's kind of annoying. Offsides to me is way too subjective still. The way that they are deciding it, they can't know if it's 100% accurate or not, because the revolutions aren't, the technology isn't good enough to where when you blow it up the way they're doing, the pixelated are still, discombobulated. You really can't tell for certain what is offsides or not without, offside actual technology, which I fear or I feel that is probably where they're going to go. And kudos if they actually do. And even then, I don't necessarily know how much you can trust that because it is everything is about when the ball is being kicked too. So you can always kind of be subjective about that. I would just like it to be just if it's to the naked eye, then there you go, level. But anyways, they can't. There's too much money on the line. I guess they can't do that. But the fun thing that I enjoyed was, Christmas, times 'tis the season for giving, and I called it the season of revenge, Revengemas. Because this was something that I saw for a lot of these games. So Chris Wood versus Newcastle, former Newcastle player, gets a hat trick versus Newcastle. Cam Archer scored versus Villa. He was a Villa player to start the season. He was on the England U21 team that won Euros. David Moyes versus Manchester United, always a fun one. I think it might have been his first a win over Man United. Richarlison scoring versus Everton. Jack Harrison scoring versus Man City. Nathan Collins kind of did the reverse. He's a former Wolves player and helped Wolves out in that Brentford game, unfortunately for Brentford. Uh, Mavropanos scoring that header versus Arsenal, former Arsenal player. This might be my favorite. Anthony Elanga. He didn't necessarily score, but he set up basically two of their goals. And Elanga is kind of the player that they decided to ship away, I guess, to bring in Anthony. Or maybe they thought, Sancho was going to take over that right wing spot in case Anthony couldn't. And that has turned out to be quite an error. Um, be, be, Man United, maybe they thought the idea was that Man United are going to try to be more of a possession control based team than necessarily a counter team. And maybe Elanga fits more in a counter team, which is why he's working more for Forest. But Man United haven't changed. Man United are still that they're kind of in between now. And you look at the production, you look at just the way that, yeah, to me, Elanga is able to get by a fullback where Anthony can't. That has been a massive error. When I get to Man United, I will focus a lot on that. Um, and then I just put Fulham's entire team versus Arsenal because I thought that was kind of funny. Bert Leno, Iwobi, performed well. And then Raul Jimenez, he wasn't necessarily an Arsenal player, but Arsenal is the team. I think it was David Luiz even that were responsible for kind of fracturing his skull. And it's taken him so long to recover from that. And so it was pretty cool to see Jimenez score versus that team. That doesn't necessarily make my brother happy, who's a big Arsenal fan. But I thought that was kind of neat. There were probably even more, but I just thought that was kind of a fun little theme to highlight. So we are at the halfway mark, and so like I said, I'll do top four Europe contenders, and then basically three teams that are safe, but that I don't really think are contending for anything else. But at least that they're safe. The goal would have been at the season to be safe, and then it, because I'm assuming maybe I'll run out of time. What I'll do is, or even if it's a short video, that'll probably be good too. Uh, I'll do an FA Cup recap, and mostly kind of include the rest of the teams that I think are in danger. So I'll definitely highlight the three promoted sides, and then it's like three or four. I think one of them is Forest. One of them is Everton, and you look at their form, that shouldn't be the case, but at the same time, points wise, it is the case. And they're on the back of two losses now. They played well versus Spurs, but they did not play well versus Wolves, and they aren't necessarily out of this either. Even if you look at their run of form since the points were deduction, run of form can be temporary. So Everton are still going to be a team to focus on, or at least be watchful for. And then unfortunately, Crystal Palace would be another, which I think that was they maybe played themselves out because they've actually had a fantastic Christmas break. Getting Olise and Eze back has definitely 100% improved them. Also, Chris Richards is starting to really play well at that DM spot. I thought they were unlucky to even not get something in that Chelsea game, even though Chelsea did create like five or six big chances, they just couldn't finish. But unfortunately for me, the one worry that's just kind of in the back of my mind, where I keep thinking, well, I'm about to get Ivan Toney back. They'll be fine. They've got all these injuries, and maybe some of them will recover. They didn't have Ben Mee for a lot of the stretch because of that red card. It is Brentford. And they're missing Mopai. Since then, Lewis Potter has come in and he's contributed to a couple of their goals, but it's not really the same player. They're missing that dynamic, and they're going to be without without Mbremo, not Mopai. They're going to be without Mbremo. I think all the way till March. He's missing African Cup of Nations. They would have missed him anyways, but apparently the injury is severe enough where he is going to miss that. So maybe mid February, late February. And so you get Tony back, but who's going to be supplying Tony? Brentford is still not necessarily out of this, unfortunately, and that is a real shame. And really, you look at how injuries have affected everyone. I mean, Newcastle are definitely up there, Brighton are up there, but really, it's Brentford. Brentford are probably the third team that are most affected by the injuries, or I guess the absences. Uh, and it is going to be just kind of a case of trying to stave off everyone else because it doesn't really feel like Brentford are going to be able to play themselves into a comfortable status essentially. So that'll be a team that to watch the second half of the season how they do carry on with Ivan Toney when they finally get him back. So that'll be like I said those teams will probably be, and I think Forest was the other one, though. hiring a Nuno Santo, that they might be a team that actually could play themselves into safety because when you look at what they have, depth wise, and what they have as far as just options in general. I mean, Gibbs White, Elanga, even Hudson Odoi might get a chance now. Dominguez is starting to get played now. They have Chris Wood, and after Chris Wood, if they get Tyro Awani back, because he's suffering from injuries now, he can come in and be an option off the bench as well. And it just seems what they were doing with Cooper was not working. And I know his hiring wasn't necessarily, uh, I guess, embraced, or I guess Cooper's firing wasn't necessarily embraced by Forest supporters, though I didn't understand it. I mean, I shouldn't say that because he this is a club that had been just in the doldrums for like 20 years, and this is a team that I think has won Europe in like the 70s. It is a big club. It's a giant stadium. Obviously, it has a very loyal and supportive fan base, and you want to stick with and reward the guy that got you to the top. But it did feel like that was a ceiling, and his management style just wasn't. It seemed it was always very defensive, and it never seemed like Forrest had really an idea of what they wanted to do. Other than that, and it was able to get them to safety last year, but it was also they had Keylor Navas. This season, it hasn't been the same, and I feel like they've spent so much money to not necessarily play that style of football. Now, Espirito Santo is also a defensive-minded, pragmatic manager as well. But you go back and you remember when he had Raul Jimenez healthy. This was the key. When he had Jimenez healthy, and when he had Adama Traore, they were still able to score a lot of goals. And you see what they have with the Langate and Gibbs White, and either Chris Wood or Wani. You can see potentially something similar here. Uh, so it's possible that doing that hire by itself is going to save Forest. Now, whether it's a great long term option, that remains left to be seen. But I was telling my buddy Jeremy, who is a Brentford fan, that this them getting rid of Cooper was a downer. And then also there was talks that Palace were thinking about moving on from Roy Hodgson to maybe hire Cooper. And I was like, because of the way Palace played versus Brentford, that's like a double whammy too, because it looks like Hodgson's going to stay. I think if Hodgson stays, he keeps them up. I think they'll struggle, but I think as long as as and Elise can stay healthy, I do think Palace have enough to stay up. So it's like a double whammy for Brentford. So you start to look at basically the promoted sides, and then maybe one or two. Maybe you can edge Everton somehow, or someone else. So it does start to get a little nervy after that. But anyways, I will start with with Liverpool being top of the table, 45 points. Now Arsenal did have 50 at the start of last year, with 20 games played. And when you look at how every team has had kind of frailties, and you see that in the points wise. Now, I feel like the league is also, you could maybe say it's a little bit more balanced. So it's a lot of teams are taking points off, and they're not necessarily, you're not seeing someone win a lot of games in a row. You're seeing a draw here and there, maybe the odd loss. Man City really are the only team that actually look relatively like set in stone, because when they have Rodri, they don't lose. When they miss Rodri, they do lose. And they're about to get Kevin De Bruyne back. Probably the biggest miss as far as a team can go this season. Well, I guess you could say Ivan Toney, but the City getting Kevin De Bruyne back, they've been able to keep winning without Haaland. Haaland has a foot injury. They expect him back sometime in January. It could be February though. You don't. I mean, foot injuries are not easy to heal with. But I will get started with Liverpool, and again, they won 45 points, so it shows how much different the season is this year than last season. I mean, Arsenal were way more. Arsenal were basically complete in some respects, at least at the start of the season last year. And the last three games, it does start with Arsenal. Liverpool did have that big fixture at Anfield, and it was 1-1, and Arsenal scored in the first 4 minutes. And it was just a free kick sent in, and no one was able to mark Gabriel. Good header by Gabriel, and Arsenal have been starting off like really fast for Liverpool in the last few fixtures. And then Salah made it 1-1, and what a goal this was! And what a beautiful ball by Trent Alexander-Arnold. Just lovely ball floated over the top, and then Salah kind of took Zinchenko a little bit to the chains. Uh, And then there was like an Odegaard handball that wasn't really given. The main thing, though, the main event other than the goals was Liverpool did have a break. I think it was Arsenal had a corner kick or some kind of counter. Liverpool basically had a 6-1, and Salah passed it out. There was Raven Gravenberch was like running next to Trent. There was also kind of a bubble, so maybe Alexander Arnold was a little fooled by that. Maybe I'm making him excuses. Maybe Trent should just bury this anyways. I mean, it is a 6-on-1, maybe a 6-on-2 because Declan Rice and Gabriel or Saliba were somewhat in the area, but it was, it was upset that this didn't go in because Alexander Arnold hits a good shot, beats the keeper, but it just doesn't beat the crossbar. And really, the kind of note that I had was it was very surprising to me how just Saka and Martinelli were just really locked up. And another thing that happened in this game was Saka injured Tsimikas, breaking his collarbone. And the reason why that was significant is before this, Klopp in like 3 or 4 games in a row, Klopp had been moving to play Joe Gomez into at right back and basically moving Trent into midfield as just a half time or a second half kind of change. He wasn't able to do that this game, and I do think they maybe suffered from that. Another thing too was we saw Gakpo played over Nunez, and Diaz, Gakpo, and Salah. It wasn't necessarily the most inventive, front line, unfortunately. And Liverpool, only 13 shots, I think, apiece, only 3 on target. I do think, not having Nunez, uh, maybe factored in a little bit. Because Gakpo does a lot of good things, but he doesn't terrorize center backs the way Nunez does. Um, and Diaz, I thought this was a game that really did worry me, and there's another good reason why I don't have to necessarily be reactionary is because Diaz was fantastic versus Newcastle, but it was just this game. I was wondering is he traumatized by his knee injury because Arsenal did injure him last season, um, and sometimes it can be just hard to get over. It's not just enough to recover and be healthy. When you have like some kind of a knee injury, something like an ACL, it takes a while to actually trust it. Neto would be a really good example of that. Last year, he was not the player that we saw this season. He had his pace back, and maybe it just takes a while for him to just trust that he can move, he can shift like that again, and maybe it just takes like one time to be able to do it. Because again, it could be hesitant, but it just seemed he was not the lightning fast kind of player that cutting on a dime that I remembered before he got hurt, and I was a little worried about him after this game, though he definitely alleviated my fears versus Newcastle because he was fantastic versus Newcastle. And then we'll move on to how they performed versus Burnley to win away to Burnley on Christmas. And Darwin Núñez starts, and he started on the left side, Gakpo through the middle. We saw this versus West Ham too. That was kind of another reason too why I was kind of expecting, well, maybe we'll kind of see that versus Arsenal, and instead we saw Diaz and Gakpo. Um, and Nunez played off the left, and he scored a fantastic goal. Nunez had been kind of on a bit of a rut. He didn't necessarily have his best game versus Man United, though Liverpool had like 30 shots. It's like one of those like things where Liverpool creates so many looks when Nunez plays, but they have to because they don't necessarily put him away other than Salah and Jota. And then, man on the speaking man of the hour, Jota did return, and it was only a 1-0 game at this point, and Jota had to come in and get that second goal to kind of kill the game off. This was a nervy game, because it was 1-0, and then Liverpool scored 2 really good goals that I thought were just really cruelly taken away, by the refs. Just There was like a lame foul that I really think was really a foul. The ref didn't call it. Like the VAR people were like, "No, this is an obvious error." I didn't think it was an egregious error. And then, really kind of a cheap offsides call that I thought. But so 2 goals, taken away. It was only a 1-0 game. Burnley, towards the 70th minute, were starting to put a little bit more pressure on Allison, forced him to make some saves, and it was a little nervy. And Jodic finally, came on, and he did what he does. He just, from a really tight angle, stupid angle, he's able to beat the keeper before the ball goes out of bounds, and yeah, that is Jota in a heartbeat. He comes in and just he scores goals that you just don't expect, and it doesn't make sense, but he does it every single game essentially. And this is what he is, and basically it's what they need, especially with Salah being out or being away. Now they're going to need his goal production significantly. So it's good to have him back. I would be in a lot more doom mode if they didn't have him. Another person to highlight here is because McAllister got hurt versus Sheffield. Indo has come in and he's been forced to kind of play a lot of games, and I have been a little more the doubters essentially. I've been like really worried. I didn't think he had the physicality to play in kind of the holding spot that requires you to stop transitions. But what they've done is they've been really good at timing things right, where uh, the ball is about to get turned over, or maybe a ball is about to be recovered by someone. But Indo has been very good to close down where he's with multiple players, uh, and he's been really good at timing challenges right, and he's been fantastic. And they're going to be without him too. It's I completely forgot about this, but uh, it's not just the Africa that's having their continental tournament. Asia is as well, and so that'll include Endo. He's in their squad, the Japanese squad. Uh, Spurs are going to be without Son, and Wolves are going to be without Wang Li Chen. So that's gonna be a tournament that's going to affect some of these teams as well, and, thankfully, they have McAllister back, but all of a sudden, I'm looking and I'm like, "Ah, I'm gonna miss some Indo." So, hopefully, that doesn't show up, but that possibly could as well, and then, the big one with Newcastle, just a crazy fast start, coming into this. Newcastle were not at full strength, it is worth saying that. Newcastle have been running on fumes, and that kind of showed, but Liverpool were also really, really good, to be fair as well. I mean, even before the goals, started coming in, they had, like, 20 shots, I think, even, like, just for the first half, and they scored a fantastic, first goal, with Luis Diaz, and just Diaz with a great run, and then, Diaz what happened was, I think Curtis Jones, like, saw Darwin Núñez making a great kind of off the shoulder run, beat, Sven Botman, and, I guess he was, like, judged to be a little offsides, and then Nunes did something cheeky. I don't necessarily know if he was lacking for confidence or what, but he played the pass to Diaz on his side, and basically it was an open goal, and Diaz was able to pass it in. And I wanted that. I wanted that to count for Diaz because again, he's struggled. He's gone through a lot of things. What I didn't even say is it's not just the injury that he's had to recover from. His family was kidnapped. Uh, and you can't imagine what kind of hell, he probably experienced in November, just, like, mentally. And, there's always been kind of a weird thing where, he speaks Spanish, and, Nunes, I guess, speaks Spanish, but no one else can really, they don't have James Milner. That was kind of like the main kind of communicator between everyone. There is Thiago Alcantara, but, that's always been kind of a thing. I think people have been, or at least, people that really follow the club have been kind of, speculating, a little worried about that. Maybe, he doesn't have, enough, like, mates, to help him out with something like that. So I wanted that to really count for him, and it didn't, and, credit to him as well because just a couple minutes after that, basically he just took the game, completely on by himself, with a fantastic run, basically running through, the Newcastle, entire defense and midfield, and then he's brought down, and then, Liverpool get the PK, and then Salah can't convert the PK because of course, and so that was kind of another moment where you wanted something like that to count and to matter. Uh, so you look at, because he got taken off and didn't end up with a goal or assist that his play really did warrant. So I hope that doesn't necessarily get lost because again, I really was worried a little bit. Looking at his form and how he had been playing, highlighted by that Arsenal game, and this one definitely calmed my nerves a little bit. Now it wasn't a full Newcastle side. It is worth saying that they didn't have Trippier, so they had to play Livramento at right back, not necessarily where he, probably best suits himself. He probably sees himself better as a left back, and that meant they also had to play Dan Burn, and that's basically where the goal started coming from because Salah decided to, I mentioned Diaz took the game over. Salah decided to take the game over. So they get the first goal with him. It's Diaz again. Diaz gets the ball and decides to cut inside and makes a couple men miss. And when you can do that, that forces a defense to shift over. And he sees Salah just complete, or he sees Darwin Nunes just wide open, completely not marked by anyone. And Diaz plays him the ball, and then basically Nunez could go for goal here. So it was awesome to see him actually square it to Salah. And then Alexander Isak made it 1-1. Isak has a habit of scoring versus Liverpool. Unfortunately, he's like one of the players that I think Virgil van Dijk like actually does fear. If you guys remember in this game, in the first fixture, Van Dijk got sent off with a red card, basically having to drag him, take him down because he was worried about Ishak being able to run past him. And Ishak did score. I think he even made his EPL debut last year at Anfield, one of those earlier games, and he scored in that game as well. And I think he even scored, and there was a kind of a borderline offsides in that one as well. So Ishak is just he's just a player that I think does the kind of torment that back line a little bit. So you're worried at 1-1. You didn't necessarily feel it was that deserved, but because Liverpool had just had so many looks. Dubravka was making save after save, and you were like, "What the hell?" And it was 1-1 in the second half, and then they get the second one with Curtis Jones, and this was just beautiful. Salah, Jota to Jones. Jota has since come in because again, just Darwin Núñez just he was creating all these looks, and he did do well to play Salah in, but he it felt like he had maybe 15 shots by himself, and just it wasn't really going in. So Jurgen Klopp did make some subs. He brought in Gakpo, he brought in Jota, and lo and behold, within like a minute or so, Jota helped lead to create the second goal. And again, Salah has the ball in the box, and he's able to just kind of fool everyone. He's able to basically thread in a pass to Jota that no one's able to mark, and then Jota has a really easy square ball. For Curtis Jones, for basically it was a similar goal to what they scored for the first one, and then Gakpo got the third, and what a ball this was! Salah basically just again just kind of ruined Dan Burn, and if you're gonna have a player that plays on the wing side essentially, and they can't for some reason they just can't do anything with their right foot. They have to be able to play this pass. Yao Cancelo does stuff like this too. So it's like outside the foot. I think they call it a Travala kind of pass. And Salah has been good at this. And what a ball this was. He just kind of curves it in to get that kind of spin, gets Gakpo to time it on sides. And the ball is so good that Gakpo literally just has to get contact. And that's basically what he does because he completely fluffs this. But because the ball is so good and the keeper has to anticipate some kind of shot, the ball basically just bounces it in after Gakpo just like hits us with his like cleats almost. To see he nearly misses this. And again, if this was Darwin Núñez, just everyone would have had this been missed. Oh man, that would have been rough. But Gakpo was able to get enough to make it count. And then Newcastle did make it 3-2 with a Botman. It was one of those again weird things where you kind of sense this game wasn't necessarily over, despite all that domination because Almiron was getting had since come on and was able to get down the line, and Newcastle did have a couple crosses in, and they lo and behold they were able to get a corner kick, and then Botman with a free header. And then it didn't necessarily matter because Salah did get a PK to make it 4-2. There's a lot of controversy in this. I don't necessarily want to talk a lot about that. I want to talk about the McAllister pass because it was an unreal pass. Also, kind of an outside the boot flick. Another thing this does is it kind of takes the spin off the ball. Uh, and he sees that Jota is on the Liverpool side of the 50-yard line, so he's not offside, and he's able to just kind of flat this in and times it perfectly where Jota's able to basically get to this when he's like 3 or 4 yards with no one in his sight, and he's played offside because he started his run. On the Liverpool side of the 50-yard line. What a pass this was by McAllister to kind of thread that in, to have that spin, and then Jota 1v1 with the keeper. Normally, you kind of fashion himself to, or fashion someone like him to to get past the keeper to score. And basically, he tries it, and maybe his touch takes him a little too far wide. I can't necessarily comment on it, but he is brought down. There's contact, and I'm just like speaking as someone that that remembers playing rec soccer. When you're clipped and you're running full speed, it doesn't necessarily matter if you're clipped that much. It doesn't take a lot for you to be off balance. I think he is off balance. I think Jota's still going to be able to get to this, and I don't think it's a dive. I don't. Salah's already missed a PK. Why are you diving when he has a chance to basically win the game himself? And Jota likes scoring goals. So I don't understand why this has been really talked about a lot, and uh, And there was talks that even the first PK was a dive. Uh, no. Sven Botman or it might be Dan Byrne goes to ground and catches him. I don't care if it's a lot of contact or not. It doesn't take a lot to put someone off balance when they're running at that kind of pace. So I thought that was kind of ridiculous. But anyways, I mean the talking point for this game was 35 shots, over 7 xG. I've never seen that kind of xG before. I think it is the highest. Dubravka with double digit saves. Um, and the main thing is Nunez does so many good things, but again, he can't finish. But the positive is his hold to play and runs. His first Liverpool scored that first goal by going long, and Nunez is able to have that really first touch to help to get past it to Szoboszlai, and that's kind of what started the movement. So he did a lot of really good things. He also had the wherewithal to square the ball to Salah instead of trying to go for the goal from the tight angle. I mean, the Salah missed PK was a little nervy. Jota had to come on, and basically when that happened, they basically did kind of take the game back, but watching this, like, the dominance in midfield was really eye-popping because, again, this fixture, in, August or September, whenever it was like 3rd game of the season, I guess August. Newcastle's midfield, dominated that game, and Liverpool, even before the red card happened to Van Dijk, Liverpool were really, they were chasing shadows, and again, this this coincides with Newcastle just not having any legs to do this anymore. But Liverpool have their workhorses in midfield now, or I guess back, and they have it. What they've done is they've actually improved in their technical quality. I mean, and someone to really highlight is Curtis Jones, and I think he's played his way to being undroppable. He's really grown up, and he's always put in a shift physically. He's always been good on the ball being pressed. The main criticism, though, has always been he's been late to recognize when seeing passes are on and being indecisive. And that is definitely changed. And you see it in this game. The ball that he played to Nunez for the Diaz goal that was ruled out, I don't think that's something he would have seen or played last season. And again, I kind of think that he's come in and really made a stake to be that starting LCM kind of spot. Now, maybe when Thiago comes back, he'd like to play in that LCM spot uh, instead. But until that happens, I think this is Curtis Jones, not necessarily someone like Gravenberch, because Gravenberch has had his moments to impress, and it hasn't really worked out. And Liverpool. I guess as far as counter pressing, winning the ball back, all the stats that Klopp probably really cares about, duels, they go up in the games that Curtis Jones features in. And I don't think that's something you can ignore. And but also, Szoboszlai, it seemed to had he kind of seemed a little leggy, but he still had a really good game, and just the way that they are able to and Endo, helped out with duels, the way that they were just able to just smother Newcastle on the ball. This is the Liverpool of old. Um, and it is just it is not something that we were able to see last season. So going off with key stats, goal scored, they have 45, just 2 off City. Conceded 18, the first. But that does feel like a lot, though. I think like Newcastle or Arsenal were like 11 or 12 last season. So the fact that we're close to 40 goals, maybe being conceded over if you kind of if you like double up where they are at the halfway point, that feels like a lot for a season. But that is just where we are. No one is perfect this year, so there are little nuances there. The top scorer is Salah with 14 goals and I think 8 assists. So that's what I mean. He's like responsible for like everything that they do. Jota on 5 goals, but Jota also has some assists. Nunez on 5 goals, but Nunez has 6 assists, and those assists aren't insignificant. So Nunez is doing a lot of good things. It's just the goals aren't necessarily coming, and I think the biggest problem for him is people are going to compare him to Holland. They arrived at the same time. Uh, similar stature. Holland is a freak. Holland is a machine, and it's not really fair to compare. Nunez does a lot of really good things. As frustrating as hell as he's because I was worried about him possibly being a bust. He's still Liverpool aren't where they are without what his production. And it's not necessarily his goal production, but he's doing everything else that helps them create so many looks a game. So he's he's a frustrating player as well. But at least in this game, uh, he didn't have like the howler that I think he had versus Luton Town. I actually think even in this game, he calmed a little bit some of my nerves. I mean, Dubravka just had a really good game. I think Onana had a really good game for Man United. And just I think the main thing is he's a rash finisher. So he's similar to Mane in some respects, and it's kind of funny because they brought him to. People thought that they were bringing him to be Firmino. It's possible they brought him to basically be Mane, because Mane was a little bit like that. He would have like these amazing finishes, but he would take things rash. He would take things quickly. It wasn't necessarily always calm. And I think you're kind of seeing that. So he gets the ball and his head is down and he's thinking just quick strike. So you get bangers like he had versus Newcastle when it comes off, but you also get duds, and that is just where it is. And it's not necessarily a bad thing because he torments every single center back, every single back line that he plays against. And it's just as long as you can have others to come in and finish the chances that he's responsible for helping to create, it's not an issue. In some of those games, they haven't really had that, and that's where Jota comes in. And as far as players of the season, Jota is going to be. He's already been important, but he is going to really be the focal point with Salah being out. And where is Liverpool going to go with Salah being out? Uh, it's going to be probably a mix between what Elliott and because we've seen Elliott try it on the right and not been too bad. Now he does kind of dropped in and he does a little bit more stuff in midfield as a playmaker than he's not than someone that's going to do what Salah does as far as making runs. But we've seen Elliott tried there, and Szoboszlai could maybe be tried a little further up. So we possibly could see that, though Szoboszlai looked like he maybe had a hamstring towards the end of this game. So, uh, the other option would be just kind of Jota, I guess, on the right, which we saw a little bit last season or a couple seasons ago. Uh, and it's not necessarily his preferred spot, but I think he can do a job there. And then the other thing that I was thinking about it is 2 years ago, Liverpool were able to withstand missing Salah and Mane. One of the players that really stood out, in a couple of those games, I think there was away to Palace, one that comes to mind, was actually Chamberlain. That was that and Minamino. They're two of their players that they don't have anymore. So, they're gonna have to find a way to get that production elsewhere. But as far as players of the season, I mentioned Curtis Jones, Elliott as well, and then Szoboszlai and Curtis Jones are the engine room that we have again, and or that they have again. And again, as far as positives, again, it's one of those funny things where one game can get you out of Doom's mode, and because they had that tricky game versus West Ham in that Carabao Cup game. And what's funny enough is they looked exactly like this that they looked versus Newcastle when they blew West Ham away, and it wasn't a bad West Ham team. Paquetá didn't play basically, and I think they played Ben Johnson instead of Emerson. But for the most part, Bowen played. For the most part, Kudus played. Yeah, Ward-Prowse maybe didn't play. That was, I guess, the other one. For the most part, that was a strong West Ham team, and Liverpool just absolutely pummeled them. And that was the game when we saw Nunez played left wing, and then Gakpo kind of played through the middle. And Liverpool again just really did smash them. I texted my buddy. I think just saw the best team playing in Europe. Maybe I was being a little bit of a homer, but they looked really really good that day. I mean, the defense has been they're tops in the league for defense. Now Allison has had to save them a couple of times, but for the most part, they've really shown up. Van Dyke looks to be back to where he was a couple of seasons ago before the injury. But you can still get him, like Ishak did, but it's not easy. Kanate is a very good teammate or partnership for him to have. And you need someone like Kanate to be able to do the things that he does because Trent likes venturing out. If Trent's not going to be played in midfield and he is a fullback, that is going to leave some space out there at times. Kwanzaa has come in and been a uh, more than enough of a surprise, a pleasant surprise. And then Gomez is coming and having to do fullback duty on both sides. And I was when Zemeckis went down, I was really worried about this because Gomez played left back versus Luton Town, and that's the game that they didn't necessarily look great in and lost in or tied in. Had to have Luis Diaz actually bail them out. And so Gomez is coming in and having to do a job on fullback. And look at that though. If Gomez is playing fullback, Van Dijk, Kanate, and Kwanzaa, that is kind of a thin back line. So that would be maybe kind of a spot when you look at January, what can you maybe do? Maybe I think I saw that they have brought in Owen Beck back, who is a fullback. Maybe the idea, or they have Connor Bradley. Maybe the idea is they can try them in like an FA game to see how they do. Uh, Try them at fullback, and maybe Gomez can go back to kind of being a center back option, I guess, because they don't have Matip now, and they are kind of thin a little bit. And the reason why I say that is Kanate can be hit and miss as far as fitness goes. As good as he is, he's very frustrating. So that would be a little bit of a concern. But I mean, as far as everything else, I mean, the midfield rebuild has helped also with that defense. They're not as open. They're the reason why they're not necessarily being transitioned on all the time is the midfield's really good at winning the ball back and putting pressure on the ball. So the high line that we saw, everyone was like complaining about a couple years ago. That's not the case anymore. They're still playing as high as they were before. Just teams aren't able to time things right because there's pressure everywhere. They never really have time on the ball. So the counter press is back. The dual winning is back, and they're about to add Tiago and maybe Stefan Bacic to that. And Alexander Arnold's new role has really been a big part of this as well. And it's just the way he's able to progress the ball upfield in just all phases. He can carry it. He can get by a player. He just sees passes over the top that only the best midfielders in the world, see, and I don't feel like I'm being that homerish by saying that. Line splitting passes as well. He's perfect weighted passes over the top, like we saw for that Arsenal goal. So that has obviously been a key factor. Just Klopp kind of embracing him to play a new role, and then Salah having a new role. They're using Nunez's legs to stretch back lines. It's not necessarily Salah. So Salah's maybe that's the reason why Elliot can actually come in and kind of do something similar. Now Elliot's not going to have the goal production, but Salah isn't always. Now he can still make those runs in behind, and we saw that for Newcastle. He wanted to get that hat trick. Uh, but he is more kind of coming closer to the ball, and that's not a problem because of the way Nunez is still able to make those runs, and they're using his legs to stretch back lines as well. That's the reason why I don't think Gakpo works because Gakpo likes doing that too, and that allows the back line to not necessarily be as threatened. So we're seeing that with the way he's playmaking. The 8 assists is unreal. What is he on? He's on is it 14 and uh, basically, he's got more goals and assists than games played, and just in the league. He's also had goal production in Europa, even though he hasn't been starting in those games. So those are all the positives. The slight concerns is the reason why I wasn't really high on them to start the season. I shouldn't say necessarily high. I was just like Champions League. I guess would be the goal. Is I did fear McAllister and Indo weren't really enough for that DM spot. I was kind of fearing I wanted someone a little bit more physical and dominant, but they've been able to, I guess, somewhat calm those fears. Another thing too is I was fearing 90 points would be required to win this title. That doesn't look to be the case anymore. So again, unless City go on to win like 25 games or whatever they do in a row, this seems like everyone is going to be kind of where we are now. So in that's the case, I do think they have enough squad to do that. Uh, the big thing I guess I have is Liverpool don't really lose games, but they don't always win games. They have had a lot of draws, and that has been a bit of a moment a little bit for me. Yeah, as we saw with Man United and Arsenal, the Cup of Nations and Indo now, I guess leaving. That is going to be something. And then just a little moment on Salah is I think it's time the football community just kind of sees Salah as basically the right sided Mbappe. And just the way only Mbappe comes to mind as far as someone that plays off the left and is reliable to score 20 goals every single season. Now, the reason why you can also say this is because the age. You have someone like Vinny who plays on the left as well. He had a great season for Real Madrid, I guess last season or 2 years ago. But you only have a couple years to judge him on. Maybe eventually he can kind of do that. But it's just you don't see this kind of production from a wide player as far as basically 30 goals and assists every single season. I just don't think people understand just how mental that is. You look at stats of like players that were wide players uh, just 10 years ago, or even the glory days when everyone is a pundit from the 90s. 12 goals from a wide player was like a very good season for them. Salah gets 20 every single season. He's always up for the Golden Boot. Uh, and I just I don't think people just realize just how freakishly good he is. Now he doesn't do the pretty step overs. He's not a dribbler like Messi was, but he still makes people miss, and he makes every fullback terrified. And I just think it's time that that is kind of respected a little bit more. Maybe I'm just kind of being a little bit Ave Homer, and I think maybe I think I mentioned it as well, but I think the main thing that I'm kind of worried or thinking about is can we see Thiago Alcantara come into this team and basically do what he did in the 2022 season, where he came in January and basically was able to go for 20 of those games, and Liverpool did not lose in any of those games, and he is a maestro on the ball. So I did that. In that Man United or even Arsenal game, if Thiago's playing, I think Liverpool score multiple goals, and we haven't seen him since that Arsenal game when Liverpool came back and down 2 goals to tie Arsenal. People just don't maybe forget that Thiago still exists. They still have him, and there are talks that he is getting ready to be able to train fully again. So he'll be fit coming up soon. So maybe we see that. And that can be kind of that would be a nice little storyline as well. Stefan Bacic can maybe come in as well. So there's still some people to return, and we'll see how we're doing for time. I already spend a lot of time on Liverpool, so hopefully it's not like 50. And it is exactly at 50. So moving on to Aston. Well, I guess what I'll do is I'll do it like top four. Yeah, do everyone else. Moving on to Aston Villa, a bit of a surprise themselves because they just won't go away. Uh, and just you wondered a little bit, like just what could have happened if they had just like the full strength squad versus Man United, or had they just like changed a little bit of their playing style, because yeah, they could have been they could have been tied with Liverpool. And they were starting to have a little bit of a dip. They had that 1-1 draw with Sheffield. They were losing in like the 89th minute, and then Zanella was able to come in and save them in that one. And the thing coming into this is, they were missing uh, Babaku Kamara for some of these games, and that was kind of showing because I think he got the red card or something happened with Brentford when I guess he got sent off. Uh, but yeah, I think that's right. And also think they played like a I think it was Jacob Ramsey. They've been forced to kind of play Jacob Ramsey. They haven't had Tielemans. Uh, I didn't necessarily have all the lineups for this one. Versus Man United though, you saw it too because Del Donker had to come in and play. And I thought you saw Kamara's miss show up here as well. Also they were trying to play. It looked like they basically were trying to do Kwanzaa at fullback again, and just he didn't really have the best of game either. And it just seemed that Man United were just kind of having fun to get basically time runs behind Kamara and Diego Carlos in that high line, and with the Garnacho and Rashford. They were sitting ducks. Essentially, you figured it was only maybe a matter of time, even though they were down 2-0. It was also a case where Man United being down 2-0 at Old Trafford, uh, right on Christmas, they might have just been like, "F it, let's just give it a go," and that's basically what they did. 2 goals from Garnacho. Even before this, they scored, and it was ruled out. And then, lo and behold, what a nice Christmas gift for Man United fans. Rasmus Højlund gets his first Premier League goal. Now he has scored like 5 or 6 in the Champions League, so he can score. And it's a good finish. It's a kind of a reactionary finish. I think it's kind of a corner kick, and the ball just kind of bounces, and he does a really good job to swing his left foot on this. And you saw what it means to him, and you were wondering, can Man United kind of keep this going a little bit? How are they going to be able to keep this momentum going? And instead, they kind of oh wait, oh shoot, I'm talking about Man United and not necessarily Aston Villa. So yeah, you were just wondering a little bit, little concerned, a little bit for Villa just blowing that 2 goal lead. They were also without Paul Torres. I forgot about that, and Tielemans. So this wasn't a full strength Villa team. And the only, I guess, talking point as far as like the Villa's attacking options is Watkins was very minimally involved. I thought that was a little bit of scare. But they were able to bounce back and get that win over Burnley. It didn't come easy. They had they did have the 2-1 lead, and they then Sanderberger got sent off. So Burnley were playing down a man, and Burnley were able to get back into the game with a goal by Foster tying it. It was 2-2 going into like the 95th minute, and then I think it's John Duran is kind of brought down. It looks like he's first to the ball, and someone clips his ankle, and Douglas Luiz is able to convert that PK. So Villa needed to stop the bleeding, and they did, and it was a good bounce back performance. What a goal it was from Bailey, and it's good to see Musa Diaby back on the score sheet because he had been taking it some time. So as far as goals scored, we have they're actually second in goals scored with 43. Conceded, they're in fifth with 27. Watkins with 9 goals and 8 assists. So credit to him. Bailey starting to get cooking a little bit for them with 6 goals. Douglas Luiz on 5 goals, most of them PKs, but he has had a open goal here and there. And then McGinn on 6 goals. As far as can Aston Villa still do this? I I think the last podcast I talked about, I compared them a little bit to Leicester, and I do think they have a manager to do it. They have a 20-goal striker, season striker in Watkins. If you just kind of copy and paste what he's done from the half season to the second half. Now it doesn't always go that way, but it's just that's all I can go off right now. So that's what I'll just kind of project. Uh, and they have a midfield of Babaku Kamara, Louise, McGinn, Tillmans, Jacob Ramsey to offer some legs. They've got a pretty good. Uh, Compact and balanced midfield. I mean, you've got dual winning. You've got players that if someone's being pressed and you need to break a press, you've got players that can do that. Kamara is really good positionally, and recognizing when player just a very fantastic a holding player, a defensive minded midfielder. Tielemans can always find a way to thread a pass here and there. Ramsey offers those runs in behind. McGinn is quietly becoming kind of a 5-tool midfielder in his own right. And they don't really have any significant African Cup or Asian Cup losses. There might be someone like Traore, but I think he's kind of a bench player. So, and I think John Duran is Colombian. So, maybe some reasons why they just might be grateful for just kind of a top four or just kind of a really high finish. They don't. They're never really going to blow out a team. To me, just kind of their playing style. So every game could be close. The high line can be exposed. We saw Newcastle do it. Liverpool did it early in the season with Trent Alexander-Arnold, and Man United were able to do it. The depth behind Watkins is shaky. Can you have Watkins go the whole season? And they did have a shaky Christmas period after those Arsenal and City wins. Now, this can be expected. That can be very draining. But they turned around and drew Sheffield. They lost Man United by blowing those 2 goals, and they escaped beating Burnley, even though they were playing down a man. So those are just some thoughts on Villa. I mean, nothing to downplay what they've done, nothing to downplay their manager. It's one of the greatest or great stories of the season to see Emery come in and really have a little bit of a redemption arc. That's awesome to see, and a lot of these players to me, I even remember when they brought in Babacar Kamara, I was like, this guy has France caps, and like the French team that like won the World Cup. This is in 2018, or the French team that was like expected to win Euros or like coming in as favorites. This is a Champions League kind of player. I think he had Champions League caps with Marseille before they brought him in. Douglas Luiz has always been, to me, he's maybe the most underrated player I think in the league as far as not being in a top quote unquote top 6 club, as they say. Now, top 6 as far as league table, you can't really say that. But Douglas Luiz is truly fantastic. And he just you watch him and just the way he's so press resistant, but he can also he's not just someone that just passes safe to safe to do it. When if he sees a pass is on, a run is on, he'll make it. He's quite clever. Um, and just it's good to see Watkins having his flowers. So this is Amy Martinez World Cup winning goalkeeper, the Gold Glove winning keeper. So there's a lot of elite talent on this team. So maybe it's just kind of this is where they should be. So we'll just have to see if they are able to continue the little stretch after beating Man City and Arsenal. Could be a little slight worry, but we'll have to see if it's just kind of temporary or not. Not having Paul Torres, I think, was significant for these games, and they didn't have Kamara. So I think they'll probably get them back. I think Torres was missing for injury, so that wasn't a suspension. Kamara, I think, was a red card. So um, I think there can be circumstances a little bit. The way that they use Paul Torres to kind of pass and break through lines, that's not an insignificant loss. So I think it's worth kind of keeping that in mind as well. And then moving on to Man City, unfortunately, so they have 40 points, but only 19 games played. Third place, but that is very that could change. And they're about to get Kevin De Bruyne back, so they do get the 3-1 win over Everton. They weren't entirely impressive in this game, but Foden had a fantastic strike to help them out, and then it was 1-1 with Harrison, and then it looked like can Everton maybe do something here? And then I thought they got a very cheap PK. Again, it was another one of those handballs. I just don't think that should be called. Um, Alvarez converted the PK, and then from that point, Everton were just playing. It looked like they were playing on fumes at this point. They just had a really hard game for Spurs that they weren't able to get points in, and then Bernardo made it 3-1, just kind of killing the game as well. And then City had the win over Sheffield with Rodri. Foden had a nice little drop back to flick a ball in. Rodri then decided to just take the game on himself. Just basically dribbled through the midfield and got to the box and had a really good shot. And there you go. City don't lose or only win basically with Rodri. And then Alvarez was able to get the second. The reason to speak a little bit on this goal was youngster Oscar Bob came in and had a little cleverness in kind of a midfield role. He did like a little bit of a rollback to kind of freeze the defender, and then quickly was able to find the pass and threaded a really nice ball to Foden, and then Foden just had a really easy square pass. So credit to Oscar Bob, good for him. Um, and there you go. I mean, it's City is City. Essentially, even without Holland, even without Kevin De Bruyne, they're still here. Even without I've mentioned their not having Cancelo, not necessarily having the most expansive fullbacks. Essentially, they're still here. Not having John Stones for like every game, but like five, they're still here. 45 goals, first in the league, conceded 20, second in the league. Top scorer is Holland, and Holland has had missed like 5 or 6 games, and they're still winning without him. Alvarez with 6 goals and 6 assists. He's really stepped up this season without Kevin De Bruyne and Holland. And Alvarez is just a tricky player because you don't really know what his best position is. But he's very similar to Jota in my opinion. When he plays, he helps lead to goals. Whether or not City fans appreciate that or not, I can't say. Bernardo on 4 goals, and then Foden on 4 goals. I think Foden has a number of assists though. Foden has kind of been a little bit more of a playmaker than necessarily been tried on the wing. I think that's kind of unlocked him a little bit as well. But with Kevin De Bruyne back, you probably can't play the two of them together, which could be something we have to see. But as far as why can City mount a charge, well, Kevin De Bruyne back, Holland back, Jamie Doku has been waiting to get back, and they're all in the wings essentially to return, and they don't lose when Rodri plays. And the schedule, you look at the schedule, unfortunately, now games aren't played on paper, but it sets up nice for another unbeaten run until like March. After that, though, it could be hairy. From March to like April, it's like it's away to Anfield. I think they have Aston Villa like shortly after that. I think they have Arsenal shortly after that. So it's not a. It'll depend if they can get that run of games, and then if they're able to play low defense, essentially when we get to there. But as far as why could they only be grateful for only like a second or third finish? Holland's foot injury could be tricky to recover from. Now they haven't missed him so far, but yeah, they could. Um, they haven't been able to stop teams from counting on them despite playing super defensive. And I don't think Pep knows what his best back line is. Whether or not it's Gvardiol, whether or not it's Ake playing at fullback, whether or not it's a Akanji playing at one of the fullbacks. Walker's been playing in a lot of these games, and you can maybe fault him a little bit for the Palace mistakes when they allow Palace to come back and draw them. Uh, and they've been without John Stones. John Stones is he likes Pep likes playing him in midfield, and they haven't been able to do that. They've been trying that with Akanji and with other center backs, and it just hasn't really worked out. So that's not insignificant. Kovacic and Mateus Nunes haven't found their footing yet. But that could change in the second half. And maybe Oscar Bob can come in and do something, or Rico Lewis has had pretty good cameos himself. I mean, City's kids are doing very well. They did well in the Champions League game that they were able to play. We saying Cole Palmer, what he's doing with Chelsea. So these academy kids are doing quite well. So they have a lot of players to try if Pep wants to maybe experiment a little bit. But the away game to Anfield in the spring is what I'm looking at because for the last few years when quote unquote City Pool have been fighting each other out, the big game, the final game has been at Etihad essentially. And this time they finally have the game. They have to come to Anfield, and so we'll see. We'll see if that pans out. If that game, if Liverpool can keep up, we'll have to see. And then I will touch on Arsenal. And at Christmas time, they were in first place, and now they're in fourth with 40 points. I mean, they're not necessarily all out of it. With the 1-1 draw with Liverpool, they were able to get the early goal, but they didn't really create a ton. And I did feel like the lack of threat from Saka and Martinelli was a little nervy, a little bit. I when I get to Arsenal, I'm gonna spend a little time on. I just think they've been overplayed. Straight up. Now I know Arteta has tried to give him a little rest, at least Martinelli a little rest with Trossard. He hasn't done that with Saka, in my opinion. Saka has played all the Champions League games for stupid reasons. Saka even played in like the Carabao Cup game that they lost in West Ham. Just they Reece Nelson was maybe injured. Maybe they didn't necessarily feel that they could play like a Fabio Vieira on the wing or what. But I just think it's too many minutes on the legs. I thought that was the kind of the issue that Saka had last year. Now I don't really want to be making excuses, but I do think I don't think you can ignore it. And Yeah, and its game, it was really bizarre because I never really felt Arsenal were going to threaten Liverpool's like goal in that second half, and I just thought it was maybe I felt they kind of got lucky a little bit to only to get a point. Essentially, there's maybe like one or two where Allison had to make a save, but it wasn't. I think both teams only had 13 shots. It was quite a stalemate. Other than the massive Trent chance. And it is going to be interesting to see how the return fixture works because they turn around and play again this weekend in the FA Cup, in the famous third round FA Cup. And the only reason why it was 1-1 is because Salah scored the goal for Liverpool, and Liverpool are not going to have Salah. So we're going to turn around really quickly and find out how some of these hypotheses are going to factor in. So that'll be fun, and that'll probably be what I mostly spend my time speaking about next show. But it was just the drop, the kind of disappointing a little bit versus Liverpool. They turned around and then had West Ham at home, but it was at night and it was raining. Don't really want to make too many excuses, but they do lose 2-0. First to Suchek and controversy on the byline again. My brother texted me and he was like, "How does this happen like to this same team?" Because it looks like the ball maybe is going out. They don't really have a camera angle on that's clear enough. The way that Boeing was actually kicking the ball, you couldn't see. The Bowen was kind of blocking the camera angle. It's one of those where, like, if the ref had called it out, they wouldn't have been able to overturn it. But it is a misfortune to say the least. But I don't think that's necessarily why they lost. Though when you give West Ham a goal, they're able to kind of do what Moyes likes to do. He likes sitting back and soaking pressure. And then West Ham were able to get the second with Mavropanos. It's just a corner kick, and or Arsenal just kind of concede off the corner kick. Uh, th- th- in this game, it was really a more story about West Ham. West Ham coming in, they beat Arsenal in the Carabao Cup, so you wondered, actually comfortably in that game. You wondered, Arsenal going to, think about that. Rice hasn't been able to beat his former team yet. West Ham have actually beaten Arsenal 3 times in the last year. If you think back, it was really the team that kind of took them out of their title run. Because I think it might have been even after the Liverpool game where they were up 2-0, and then West Ham came back and either came back to draw it to 2-2 or even like beat them 3-2. Where I think even Saka missed a PK. That was really the turning point when Arsenal season kind of went away. There was also you're starting to see kind of Holden kind of hurting him a little bit. Um, but anyways, like that's just West Ham have started to be a bit of a bogey team, and it's just kind of funny. Rice versus former team, it hasn't really worked out for them. Another talking point was just what a player Alvarez was, but we're on Arsenal. And then we get to the Fulham game, and they get off to a really good start. Opening 5 minutes, they had a number of looks, and then Saka did score. And basically, it was one of those cases where Fulham had a counter, and I think it's Castagna. Castagna's trying to get to a loose ball, try to cross it in, and by doing that, he then has to run out of bounds, and then Raya sees that and throws it basically to where Martinelli is, or where it might even be a Rice or it's Havertz, and basically they're able to counter it down that side with Castagna, the fullback, the right fullback, being out of position. So Martinelli is able to get to the ball. He basically has no one to challenge him, and he cuts inside. He has a shot, and then the shot basically parries to Saka, and Saka has just kind of the tap in. And you were wondering, well, there you go. There's the Arsenal you kind of expect. You expected them to kind of bounce back. They had 30. Another thing I didn't say, they had like 30 shots versus West Ham. That was just a case of that was the case of really maybe missing a striker essentially. There were a couple of times when you're like, yeah, someone could have benefited a little bit better. They went into that game without Havertz, but Trossard maybe helped them get some of those looks. But Havertz did miss that game. Maybe he could have helped in there, but he was able to play this game, and he didn't really help out here. And then it didn't last long because after I want to say like 15 minutes or so, it felt like Fulham were actually the I want to say the dominant team, but equal team. And then you finally saw it reflect on the score sheet. So they get the goal with Jimenez, and Arsenal actually look like maybe they're about the ones to get the second goal. It's a kind of a sloppy pass by Iwobi. It's intercepted, but Calvin Bassey is really quick to recognize the trouble and times a great challenge on Saka to draw the bar loose. And then from there, Fulham have the opportunity to break, and they see Tom Carney flying down the wing, and then he has a really good square ball that crosses all the way across the field, finds Jimenez back post, and Jimenez is able to bury it. And then Bobby Reed scores off the corner kick. Fulham had a spell of corner kicks in the second half, and they were able to make that count. And really, the only other chance that Arsenal got there was a cross that came in and kind of fooled Anthony Robinson and Bassey, and then Saka was basically alone, kind of close to goal. It's not an easy hit. People kind of going at him, making fun of him a little bit for here. I think that's harsh, but he does blaze it over. But again, that's just like the only real clean cut chance that they created in the second half, and we saw Arteta actually change it up a little bit in this game as well. We saw Nketiah and Jesus play together. We basically saw them go to almost a back five or a back three. It was like a 3-5 kind of two, bit of a shape. He was trying to fit Nketiah and Jesus together. I didn't necessarily hate it, but it wasn't really effective. And they basically had, they had Trossard on as well, and they weren't able to a lot of attacking players, and they just weren't able to really get anything to stick. Only 13 shots this game. Again, 30 plus for first West Ham. One player that definitely showed up though was Zinchenko. And when I get to Arsenal, that is going to be, or I guess I'm Arsenal now. That is going to be the main thing that I kind of focus on a little bit. So here with Fulham game, this wasn't like a smash and grab. This was pretty deserved. Fulham were edging Arsenal in possession in the second half. Now Arsenal like ended up with like 65 and whatever it was, but Fulham in the mid second half, at least maybe it was only for the second half, but Fulham had like 51% of the ball. I thought Fulham were a better job of passing through lines and getting their attacking players the ball in space. I thought they were more aggressive in their challenges, and the note I had is I thought they had more of an idea of what they wanted to do with the ball than Arsenal. I thought Arsenal moved the ball too slow, and that's where I think Nose and Zinchenko really showed up to me. Rice, Saliba, Gabriel, Ben White. No one can really pass through lines like that. It's one thing if it's just Rice and you have like defenders that are pretty good at stretching the field, but the negative you can go look at with Saliba and Gabriel and even Ben White is they aren't those kind of players. Ben White offers you a lot of things, a lot of positive things, but he's not really that kind of player. He's very good at picking out someone ahead of him down down the touchline essentially, and he's really good at running, making runs. And he's good cross on him, but he's not someone that's going to thread a pass essentially. Saliba, I don't think is that either, and neither is Gabriel. And you can't have that many people in your back line with Rice. Where that's an issue because Rice likes going side to side, and you're just seeing Arsenal stagnate a lot. And the one player that kind of recognizes tempo, in my opinion, in that team is Zinchenko. And they're about to get someone like Timber, who they've missed since signing essentially. Timber can either play left back or right back. He can play either side. I'm wondering if when they get Timber back, the idea is to try Zinchenko actually in midfield. to maybe kind of fix some of this because Zinchenko, he can get got at defensively, but on the ball, he recognizes he helps them get the ball to Odegaard in positive areas where Odegaard can be influential. In this game, I saw Odegaard having to come for the ball way too many times, and that's taking energy from him just to come to receive the ball, and then when he gets it, Odegaard has to be the one to kind of unlock teams. On Odegaard has to be the player to make things happen in the to get from the middle third to the final third. So I just thought it was too slow. Uh, was not going to be just going at Declan Rice, but they didn't have this problem last year because they had Thomas Partey. Now the flip side of that is the Declan Rice is responsible, and the other players that I mentioned are better positioned to stop counters, to stop teams transitioning on them, and Arsenal have a lot more control this season because of that. But I don't necessarily think having control of the ball is always a positive because you're not able to get transitions yourself. And two, when you've got so much of the ball and you're dominating that much of the ball near an opponent's goal line box, and you can't create looks, that to me is a problem. And I don't necessarily know if just having an Ivan Tony and being able to cross stuff into him would change things. It would have changed something versus West Ham because I did think West Ham were gettable. In this case, I don't necessarily know if that is the case. So that'll probably be a little bit of a theme that I really focus on. As far as goals scored, 37, conceded 20, so that's not bad. Soccer though won 6 goals. That's their top goal scorer. Liverpool at 14 with Salah. Man City have Holland on 14 with Holland. And when you look, Aston Villa have Watkins on it's like 9 goals and I think like 8 assists. You to challenge for the title, you generally need someone that's going to get you 20 goals. I don't care where it comes from. They don't really have that. Now they had something they Arsenal were close last season having Saka on 15, Odegaard on 15, Martinelli on 15. I think Martinelli has like 3 this season. Odegaard's on 4. Jesus hasn't really been fit for like half the season, so this isn't on his fault, but I think he only has 2. So I mean, Nketiah is the top or second leading goal scorer on 5 goals. He didn't have a hat trick in a game, so that's why. Havertz is on 4 goals. But that is why you see people are maybe downing Arsenal a little bit, and that's probably why you're seeing everyone being like, "Oh, go get a striker," which it makes sense. But at the same time, there could be other areas to improve. Um, I mean, as far as why can you believe in Arsenal? I guess I can make that kind of argument. Defensively, they are very good. Saliba, Rice, and Gabriel, all three are very good at stopping crosses, good at being aggressive and timing challenges in transitions. Havertz and Jesus, in my opinion, work pretty well as a tandem. Um, if for some reason Havertz and Nketiah, when they've been tried together, haven't necessarily worked out as well. That's another thing too. Nketiah started this game, not Jesus, but Nketiah only had, like, 3 touches in the box, and I don't necessarily think it's because he wasn't making good runs. I I rewatched the game, and there were a couple of times when I was able to, pause it and be like, "The run is on," and just no one is looking to play him. So, again, it could be just, that day, they just didn't see it that day. I can't explain it. Uh, the things that I can offer is Zinchenko in that position probably would have played that pass. Partey in that position probably would have played a pass like that. The reason why City didn't beat Arsenal at the Emirates is because Arsenal, or not, I shouldn't say that. The reason why Arsenal beat City at the Emirates is because Partey was able to come on as a bench player, and he played a pass to Havertz that helped basically create the goal. And people maybe forget about that. Partey, hasn't been able to play much of the season, but he was able to play there. So one thing I'm wondering is, can Thomas Partey do a Thiago? That I was speaking about Liverpool. Can Thomas Partey come in and have a really great second half of the season? He apparently isn't going to be away at African Cup of Nations. He's still injured and he's trying to recover from his injury. So does that to me says he's 'cause there was speculation that he was going to try to play for Ghana, maybe even half fit essentially, and so it looks like he's prioritizing club football. And for his age, that's not easy to do. Now, African Cup of Nations are every 2 years, but it's not an insignificant sacrifice. So can Partey come back and do maybe have a repeat a little bit of what he was able to offer? Because Partey was able to split lines and they were able to get Martinelli, Odegaard the ball where they can turn and go at a defense that isn't set. Because Arsenal have this thing of my brother's big on uh, field tilt. In this game, at least, it's self-inflicted. They're moving the ball slow to get the ball, in the final third intentionally when you could be a little bit more direct. Now, the flip side of that, obviously, is by being a little bit more direct and being a little more risk taking, it's not always going to come off, and that's going to force you to have to stop transitions on you. And I don't know if the idea is, I don't know if it's Arteta was worried about conceding too many things on transitions. That's the reason why they went to get Declan Rice, obviously. Or it's just so. I don't know if it's a case of Arteta doesn't want them to play that kind of football, or they're not capable of it. That is really the question to ask at the moment. So as far as and they're about to get Timber back, so I wonder can you put Zinchenko in midfield and maybe try to fix some of that as well, because Declan Rice being played instead of Party, I think I've harped on this way too many times, but I guess I'll repeat myself. It's again better defensively, but not better with the ball. But you also don't have Granit Xhaka, and I just remember last season watching Arsenal when Martinelli would cut inside. Xhaka was very very good at recognizing to run and still be an option out wide. And so Xhaka, Martinelli would cut inside. This happened for Liverpool. Martinelli would cut inside. There'd be a quick pass to Zinchenko. Zinchenko one time it to Xhaka, and Xhaka would have all the space to fire in a really hard low cross, and that was hard to beat. They don't have, Havertz has come in. Havertz is starting to, get some goals the last few games, but Havertz is not doing the runs without the ball like that. He's not recognizing to keep with. He's not recognizing to interchange with Martinelli. And I think getting Havertz has been kind of that's been a sticking point as well. And it's not necessarily to say they shouldn't have gotten Havertz. I'm iffy. I'm back and forth on that essentially. But Havertz isn't doing what Xhaka did, and losing Xhaka and not finding a likable replacement has hurt them significantly. No other a better player to highlight that than Martinelli. I think Martinelli is really hurting from that. That's the reason why his goal production is significantly down. So, and I don't think they can necessarily play Trossard in a midfield three. They tried that versus West Ham, but defensively, I just don't know. So that left side has been weird. It's been weird all season. With Havertz, Martinelli, and defensively with Sinchenko as a fullback, it's been a weak point. So as far as that's kind of a reason why that's kind of changing from the optimistic side to a little bit of the negative. So as far as good as their defense is, because they've only conceded 4 more than Liverpool, their XG conceded is 16. Their expected goals conceded, from the statistician people. So they're underperforming by 4. Why is that? I'm wondering if it's David Raya. And I was one of those that thought Raya is a better keeper anyways, but David Raya has had a number of mistakes. Now I don't necessarily remember. I can't remember off the top of my head if all those mistakes were in Champions League or not. I don't think they were. So that could be, they don't have Ramsdale. They've been trying to get better um, uh, as far as a playmaking keeper, um, but it hasn't necessarily improved them. I don't necessarily want to say it's negatively affected them, though I don't necessarily know if it's been a net benefit yet to date. Uh, One thing you could say, at least as far as performance wise, one thing you could say that has that maybe affected the locker room? Because Ramsdale was liked, but that's speculation. I can't say. Uh, but it's not just the goals. This is kind of the main thing that I want to really highlight that I've kind of already done, but they don't create enough big chances. Newcastle and Liverpool are near 70. Chelsea are like near 70. Arsenal are on 54. And again, my brother brought up field tilt, and I don't necessarily think dominating the ball in that kind of manner when you're not creating a lot of chances is a positive. And the reason why is they move the ball too slow. And again, I don't necessarily know if that's intentional, if that's been directed to them because it's safer, or they aren't capable of playing the way they did last season. So again, that's basically that's the questions to think about when you discuss Arsenal. I do think Martinelli and Saka have been predictable, but they don't have people overlapping them every single game like they had last season. You don't have Shaka being able to do that, and Ben White has been maybe asked to be a little bit more defensive minded. And there hasn't been nearly as much risk, or maybe they want Saka to be isolated and take people 1v1. But I think Saka has been. I think teams have been really when they've been playing Arsenal, I think they've been targeting Saka. And what I mean by that is I think they've been game planning to have two men on him. So it's not just Saka 1v1 with a fullback. It's Saka with a fullback and then a center back really, really tight on him, or at least, or maybe a defender. Everyone, like the focus is on Saka. When Saka gets the ball, teams like know how to game plan against that, or they are specifically game planning against that. So, and so that's probably the reason why Saka, and it's not necessarily like Saka's struggling. 6 goals, and I think he has a number of assists. And for being as young as he is, he is still an elite player production level for a wide player. But I see similar things that Salah sometimes does with Saka, and his first thought is always to cut inside and to get the ball on his left foot. He never threatens with his right. And if that's going to be the case, he's got to learn to do that Travala kind of pass, or this isn't going to. It's too easy when he cuts inside, and you don't have someone overlapping. Maybe it's Odegaard. It's too easy for teams to kind of recognize and predict that's going to happen. And when the team can predict how you're going to play, usually they can predict how to game plan against it. And I think that's what we're seeing a little bit with Arsenal. So, one thing I would like to maybe see is Arteta kind of switch up the lineups a little bit. I don't know if you can try Saka on the maybe one game just try Saka on the opposite side of the field with Martinelli on the opposite side of the field. Uh, just to kind of change things up. Maybe try Reece Nelson in a game or two. Maybe try Martinelli through striker and Jesus out on the left. Now that requires different roles require different defensive duties. But I just think they need to switch it up a little bit. I also think Odegaard's having to do too many roles at once. He has to overlap Saka, so that pushes Odegaard away from being in the central part of the field to being on on the touchline. So maybe Odegaard can send in a decent cross, but who are you crossing it into other than Havertz maybe? So I don't necessarily think that's the best way to get Odegaard going. I think he has to drop. He has to be. To me, he's supposed to be the orchestrator of the attack when you get the ball in the final third. And to me, he's having to sometimes Rice is having to just go side to him, and Odegaard has to be the guy to also find a pass or run to get the ball into the final third by himself. So he has to help from the middle third to the final third. I just think it's too much. It's too much for one player. And another thing too is I think teams recognize that. I think teams recognize if you can mark Odegaard out of the game, which is what Paulinho tried to do, and it's what Alvarez tried to do, Arsenal can struggle. Now, no, West Ham's not the best example because they did mark Odegaard kind of out of it, and they still got 30 shots. But anyways, so is it necessarily a case of go in to get Ivan Toney or Victor Osimhen, which is a lot of money? I don't know if they have the funds to even do that. But is the case, or even a Dominic Solanke, is that the case that this changes much? Given the way how they weren't able to find Nkadia, I don't know if it does. As crazy as that is, I mean, if a team is creating 20 plus looks a game, eight shots on goal, and no one 8 shots on target, and just no one's able to beat a keeper, that I understand. But and the another problem is Jesus' expected goals, I think, is only 3. So he's only underperforming by like 1. He's not, and again, he hasn't been healthy for a lot of the season. So there's some ifs there. But I just wonder if that's more the case than necessarily just bringing in a striker fixes all your problems. I think the issues I spoke about before you're getting into finding a striker to finish the chances, I think that's more the issue. I mean, one thing I texted my brother is there was a player at Real Sociedad in as Martin Zubamendi, who I think maybe would fix a little some of that central issues. Being able to find someone that would thread passes. He's good defensively as well, and you can have Rice instead of being the number 6 guy. To do more of the off the ball advanced stuff, ahead. To maybe be more of the Granit Xhaka kind of player. Instead, uh, but uh, but I don't necessarily know. I haven't even looked at his contract. I know he's been linked to Man City. I know he's been very linked to Barcelona, and it's not always easy. I think he's 24, where you bring a different player to a different league. That can always be kind of iffy as well. Different countries, so. But I just think that is kind of the issue. So it's not necessarily Declan Rice coming in specifically or Havertz coming in specifically. It's just you're not able to play the way you were last season, and you can't just pick and match. You can't just pick Declan Rice to play like Thomas Partey, Havertz to play like Xhaka because that isn't working. Um, and that's why I think someone like the only place that really does recognize tempo is Zinchenko. And again, I think I mentioned it before. When you get Timber back, which they are about to get Timber back, maybe that can be the idea. And it looks like Ben White has been really playing on one leg as well. So Tomiyasu back, maybe you can give Ben White a little rest, play Tomiyasu on the right, play Timber left back. And when you get Zinchenko back, Zinchenko just wasn't healthy for this game, but doesn't sound like there's anything serious. When you get Zinchenko back, try to fit him maybe in midfield. Just trying to stretch it up. And the other thing too is if you're not going to have the LCM work with Havertz, I mean they do have Fabio Vieira to maybe try. Though there were a couple of games when that was doing well, and then versus I think it was Tottenham, he was kind of beaten physically. But they have Smith Rowe as someone to maybe try, or you can maybe try Smith Rowe on the higher up as an option. I don't really get why he hasn't been tried much. I just feel like you could experiment a little bit more, and I want to see Arteta do this. Arteta is going to have to show that it's one thing to be a good motivator, and he very clearly is, but it's another thing to when things aren't always going well. How can you make adjustments? And I want to see this from him. So we haven't seen Smith Rowe much. We haven't seen Reece Nelson much. I wanted, can you try flipping Martinelli and Saka? Can you try Jesus maybe on the wing for a couple of games? That I think Jesus even played on the wing for Spurs. So it doesn't always have to be either Nketiah, Martinelli, and Saka, or Martinelli, Jesus, and Saka. Just the front three. It's just very. You look at an Arsenal lineup. It's the same every game, and the problems that they're having for the most part, West Ham, not included, are kind of the same every game. And so, I don't really know. One player I didn't mention was Trossard, and they were trying to get Mudryk last season. You understand why, maybe. Martin Mudryk could maybe offer Martinelli, competition for that spot. Trossard is not going to be the same player that Martinelli is. Trossard is more of a kind of a ball to feet player, very creative. He could be like a 10, but that's where Odegaard is. But Trossard is probably the best pure finisher on the team. As for you, if someone gets a look inside the box, you probably won't expect Odegaard. You want Saka to take it. You probably want Trossard to take it, as far as, like, the next player. So, how do you find a way to get Trossard onto the field more? I think they're struggling a little bit with that. I don't necessarily know if taking Martinelli off and putting Trossard on is necessarily the best thing. Can you find a way to put Trossard maybe on the left, Martinelli through the middle, essentially? Maybe you see a little interchanging. But I'm just kind of I'm going over scenarios, essentially. But another thing too is Arsenal were not always playing a 4-3-3. Last year, I did think it was a 4-2-3-1 with Xhaka and Partey, and then Odegaard basically as the 10, and they kind of moved it over. In the summertime, it was almost a 3-2-2-3, or it was like a three. It was what Man City were doing. It was like the 3-1 kind of four with the double tens and the wide players, and then the striker. And I feel like the reason why they got Timber is the idea was that to play Zinchenko with Rice is as the pivot, and they haven't been able to do that because of the Timber injury. So, do we see that? That'll be something interesting. So it would be like I don't know what that would mean to Gabrielle, but the back three would be like a Timber, Saliba in the middle, and then like a Ben White. Um, or maybe you could play Saliba on the right, maybe Gabrielle through the middle. I don't know. So that is kind of where I am with that. And then I think the last one I'll do is Tottenham. So that's not too bad. So the last one I'll do is Tottenham in there. There we've got 39 points, fifth place. They really good game win versus Everton, 2-1. Richarlison scoring versus Everton. That feels kind of mean. Son getting the second, and then Andre Gomez had a really good game, a really good goal and end game. And Everton probably were hard done by. They played well in this game, but Spurs were able to get that big win, and then they turned around and kind of got thumped a little bit by Brighton. Now this is the case of Spurs coming into this, maybe not necessarily at full strength. No Christian Romero, and I think the backline really did suffer. No Bissouma in this game as well. And Hitzelwood got the early goal, and then Yao Pedro basically took the game over with a goal and then a PK. And then Estupiñán, Brighton were able to welcome him back, and he had a really good goal. And then Spurs made it interesting in the final 10 minutes with Valise and Davies. And they nearly got a third with 5 minutes or so to go in extra time. They really did pour it on as far as the response. So that was good to see. But they did get thumped here. Uh, no Basuma, and Hoiberg started instead of Sar, or so Hoiberg started with Sar. People were wondering, well, maybe try someone else, and then they had a really good game versus Bournemouth with Sar getting the opening goal, and then Son, and then Richarlison again. Richarlison could have had a hat trick. He's helping, and he helped create Son's goal with his little link up play, little dropped in and helped get the ball. Helped to be an option, and then that's how they were able to quickly strike. Brennan Johnson also has come in and started to be really serviceable out wide. And he had a couple. He had a square ball to Richarlison, and he had a square ball here to Richarlison, and it's good to see. It's good to see that Richarlison is starting to score for them. He's on a bit of a heater. It's also good to see Brendan Johnson be productive. Be productive on the right side. No Kulishevsky this game. He's come in and you see so many of this inverted stuff. It makes me sick. But the way that they play Pedro Porro kind of through the middle, inverted, you can't do that. So it's good that they have someone on the right side that can come in. He has pace to get past behind a fullback, and he has a right foot to actually send in a decent ball with that kind of spin going away from the goalie. And it's working. It's working out pretty well for them. So good to see. And they spent a lot of money on him. Um, I've I have my brother's wife is a Spurs fan, and she was not necessarily enamored when they bought him because they did spend a lot of money, and they're like, well, "Is he Kane?" And I was like, "No, he's not Kane." She was like, "Well, we need Kane. We need a Kane-like player," and I understood that at the time. So again, where Spurs are, the fact that they're still not out of this, they're not out of a title race, to be honest. And another thing to think about is they might even be more than 40 points. They might actually be closer. Um, they are about to get. There's a caveat here. They're about to get Madison back. They're about to get Mickey Van de Ven, and uh, for some reason they're without Christian Romero again until like mid-January for another injury. So I don't necessarily know if when they're going to get him back. They need to get him. They need to get a defender in January. I think that's certain. But they're going to get Madison and Van de Ven back, but they are going to lose Son for Asia Cup. And you look at, it's as important as Liverpool missing Salah. This is not insignificant at all. They can try maybe Richarlison on the left or Brendan Johnson on the left, maybe Kulishevsky in the right, and Richarlison through the middle. That'll probably be what they do. They're also going to be without Sar. Now he had a hamstring issue, so maybe they'd be without him anyways. And they're going to be without Basuma. Now they've been missing him because of that red card, but they're going to miss him for Africa Cup of Nations as well. Uh, that's not insignificant losses at all. So it's kind of unfortunate. One positive though is they do have Rodrigo Betancourt back, and he helped actually set up the first goal. So that's good to see for them. Um, and then Bournemouth got one with Alex Scott. And so it was good to actually see them with Betancourt. And the interesting thing about this game though was Spurs get the 3 goals, but Bournemouth did have like 24 shots. They didn't have many on target. So Spurs were outshot. Um, but I did feel like their defensive frailties, I felt maybe started to show after Skip had to come off. So after Sar had to come off, so Skip came on. I felt that maybe we made them a little bit worse. No center backs, Royal and Davies. Davies has put in a pretty good shift. It's not really his fault. He's playing a position that's not really his, but expected goals since like November, since basically that Chelsea game when they lost Van de Ven and Romero. Spurs are up there for like the most conceded or most expected to concede. Uh, and that's really the reason why, it's hard to, like, really truly believe that they can go on another run again, even with getting, Madison back. Getting Van de Ven back, could change things, but they just don't have, center back depth at all. So if they can bring in someone, that would change things up. Now there's gonna be a player that I think every top club is going to be linked to in, Todibo. He plays for Nice. Now Man United just got owners that in Ineos that uh, I think are majority owned at Nice as well. So I don't necessarily know if he's going to be linked there. And you look at well, maybe they want to move on from Varane. So Man United could be looked at there. I know Liverpool fans, or at least Liverpool supporters that I follow, are big fans of him. And you look at the way that Kanate is kind of a hit and miss health wise, him coming in would strengthen their back line. He's a ball playing center back that he was a youth Barcelona product, and for some reason it just didn't necessarily work out there. And he's come into France, and he's been spectacular the last 3 or 4 years. And it's not necessarily like that league is terrible when it comes to looking for center back talent because that's where Saliba basically came from. So, he's kind of a player where if you're looking for a center back, I think that's probably that's like the cream of the crop, essentially. I know there's someone there's someone at Leverkusen, that has gotten, many eyes. Um, Simiken at, let's see, Leipzig has probably gotten some eyes, and then, I think they have been linked to someone in Italy, and, one thing you can say about Spurs is they've been really good at just recognizing some talent into Serie A that no one recognized. Udogi, came from Serie A. I think Vicario came from Serie A. So maybe they look there, for someone. I think they've been linked to someone like Dragic, someone like at Genoa. But no matter who it is, he needs to come in and be as good as Van de Ven has been. Um, and so that's kind of like the main thing. For goal scored 42, conceded 29. The only reason why they haven't conceded more is because Vicario has been a really good keeper for them, but they are seventh. But seventh, here we go, 17th worst for XG conceded since November. Top scorer, you have Son on 12 goals, so that kind of goes to what I was saying. If you're going to compete for something, some kind of title, you need a goal scorer that's going to get you close to 20. So Spurs, click that off with Son, which also starting to get going for them with 6, and then Kulishevsky with 5. Kulishevsky wasn't able to go this game. So that's why you could probably play Brendan Johnson on the left, Kulishevsky, on the right if they wanted to go that way. They are about to get Madison back, and then really the players of the season are Pedro and Adogi. Because when it comes to just ways to, when you think of like how to create mismatches on the field, Pedro and Adogi kind of just do that better as good as anyone really in the league. And you've seen every team that they played really struggle with that. And Spurs, I think I saw, are the best when it comes to created goal scoring chances from open play. There are always like caveats to this, uh, but the reason is those two fullbacks are unique in a very very unique way. I'm kind of repeating myself, but another reason why they're unique is they don't really play fullback, and so by not having someone like Van de Ven, not having the recovery pace to stop transitions, they haven't got at since that loss has happened. So get him back. Hopefully, you get him back and he doesn't have another like lapse. From injury because sometimes that can happen as well. But that's kind of like the main thing. They're also starting to really find something with Rich Richarlison. It's good to see him coming back and starting to come good. Maybe that's the reason why they're not going to actually be in the lookout for a striker because they probably were before Rich Richarlison really started to show up because they started the season with Son being in the middle, if you don't remember, and they recognize that most of their big chances were actually coming from the left side, so they moved Son back to his favorite spot on the left wing, and all they've done is actually improved their goal output. So that's been a good change, and the reason why they've been able to do that is they got Richarlison back from injury, and since he's recovered from injury and gotten a run of games, he's like 5 or 6 games, 5 or 6 goals in the last 5 games, for him. So that's really good. And, really the only kind of, scare for them is they're gonna be a month without Son, Bissoma, and Sarr. And, Bissoma and Sarr has kind of been like their workhorse midfield. The reason why you can play Pedro or Porro and, Udogie in just weird kind of, makeshift, ways that create overloads just anywhere else on the field, mismatches everywhere, is because of the work that they do without the ball. But you're gonna be without them. And I don't really think Oliver Skip can maybe do, like, the physical stuff, but I don't think he's good enough technically. It's not the same player. Hoiberg is kind of it seems like they're about to get rid of him. Now you are gonna get Bettencourt back, but, can Bettencourt go, these 3 or 4 games when he's gonna be asked to really be the workhorse for them. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Maybe if getting Bettencourt back, that's gonna be a way for them to survive this. We'll have to see. And then that is pretty much it. I've got Europe contenders, so I went way longer than I was expecting. When I speak about Liverpool, that generally happens. We're at 145. Can I do Man? I don't want to do Man United now. That'll probably be it. So what I'll do is I'll do Europe and top 10 next show. Maybe I'll probably not do that long FA recap. Maybe I'll just kind of talk a little bit what happened with Liverpool and Arsenal because that's just what I like to do. And then what I'll do is I'll cover Europe and then top 10, like the three that I mentioned, and then maybe even after that, I'll do a different show for the ones that I'm a little bit worried about. But anyways, that is it. We're at the halfway mark, and it's been fun. It's been a fun season. It's been an unpredictable season because again, it is the last few years Man City are still there, but we've been kind of thinking a team has to be almost perfect. A team has to be like 95, 90-ish points to even be close to sniff this, and it looks like that's not going to be the case this season. Not everyone is everyone. Every team has some kind of imperfectness to them, and that makes it fun. So we'll see how it pans out. Everyone is going to be very focused on what happens with the January transfer window. There's going to be a chance for someone to really improve themselves, or someone to uh, really screw themselves over. So we'll have to see there. And next game or next week when I do this, I'll probably will lead off with Man United, even though they aren't in the table. But I probably will spend the most time speaking about them because they've been a story of the season, maybe not for the reasons that they would have wanted. And it's always just kind of fun talking about that. So I'll probably start off with them and then really praise West Ham for what they've been doing because I never would have expected them to be six in the table or Brighton. Brighton should have been not a surprise to start the season, but when you look at where their injuries are and just the key players that they're missing week in and week out, I honestly think this is as impressive of a job that Deserby's done as last season, maybe even better. Deserby is really showing me something to the way he's been able to because that the amount of players that they've missed and the way that a club like Brighton that could send a team down. The amount of quality that they have just been forced to play without this entire season, it did send someone like Eddie Howe down at Bournemouth. They had a massive injury crisis that just wasn't really explainable, and they just didn't have enough quality to replace it with. It hasn't been the case so far with Brighton. Brighton are still in a chance to fight for a Europa spot. So credit to them as well. And then I think probably I guess I'll have to spend time on Chelsea. Unfortunately, they've been another story of this season. They are possibly about to have a better 2024. We'll have to see. For some reason, I keep wanting to believe in them. Maybe I'm trying to reverse jinx them. But getting Nkunku back, all of a sudden he's helping leading them to goals. Madueke has since being able to play on that right side. He's starting to lead to some goals. Cole Palmer, people were having fun with him only scoring PKs. Cole Palmer started to really bloom and star for them as well. I think you're seeing Jackson playing a little bit better. Now because he's got someone like Nkunku to help with the goals, so Jackson's kind of being a little bit more of a setup man, assist man. The only things with Chelsea that are starting to be interesting is arguably their player of the season has been Conor Gallagher, and it's sounding like because of financial fair play rules, they might have to sell him. And I can think of one team immediately that would benefit from that if they were able to do it, which would be Newcastle. They would love his kind of legs. They would love Eddie Howe would love to have someone like him in that engine room. Um, but I think the reason why they have to do that is they spent so much money on Caicedo, on Roman Lavia, who they haven't really been able to see until the last few games, and Enzo Fernandez. And that's and when you're playing with a Cole Palmer, that's like a kind of a number 10 kind of player as well. You can't fit them all on the field at the same time. And Conor Gallagher looks like he might be the one odd man out. And a team is significant. If a team can get him, they're gonna get a quite a good player. He's not just someone that is a workhorse as well. He's improved technically, in my opinion. He can do a number of jobs. So we'll see who gets linked to and who might go for him. But that'll be next show. We'll probably spend some time talking about that and Newcastle. Newcastle will be the other one I'll have to talk about. Unfortunately for them, everything has changed since November, and it's one thing where a team just suffers injury after injury, and you're just like, you just hold your head up, and it's like, what else can you do? In this case, I do think it was poor management decisions by Eddie Howe, where he had an injury crisis. He was forced to play way too many. He was supposed to play the same team basically every single game, and he didn't trust, he didn't wanna give away games. There was an Everton game when he maybe could have rested players and eaten points, and he didn't, and he just kept playing the same squad every single game week, and not only that, he didn't change how they played every single game week, and that ended up showing up. So one injury led to basically cascading into multiple injuries, and because they didn't change anything, it just collapsed on them, and they don't have anyone else to play, and they basically made everyone run in the tank E. And so what they do if they were able to do stuff in January, we'll have to see. I would because their midfield had looked strained. That's where I think Conor Gallagher would significantly help him out. It's not really Eddie Howe's fault that they had to lose Tonali. The reasons why they did, I think that's been a low key storyline as well. Because with Tonali, I think this Newcastle team possibly could have pushed for something serious, not just top four. But the loss with him, maybe backline has always been kind of shaky. They only got Sven Botman back, and I don't think he's healthy. He didn't look healthy versus Liverpool, so it might take him some games to get back into shape as well. So that could take some time. And you look at their fixture list; it doesn't get easy after this. They have a FA Cup versus Sheffield. I think is it Sheffield? No, it's Sunderland. And if people don't know, that's like their weird. That's like the Manchester and Liverpool kind of like derby. That's like a weird uh, regional rivalry. Essentially, those teams don't like each other, or those clubs don't like each other, and it might be the first time that they played each other in since like I don't know 2009 or 2008, because they haven't been in the Premier League for a while, and they might look at Newcastle like a wounded dog. So that game on paper might not necessarily seem exciting, but I think that could maybe be a low key gem. We'll have to see. If Eddie Howe loses that, and then you've got Man City, and then you have Aston Villa in the league. So it could be a real run of games where they just lose a lot. I think there were like 5 games with losing, or 6 games losing 5 games in a row. Maybe they have a draw here and there. One of them being Luton Town. Not great. And I do fear a little bit for Eddie Howe, but at the same time, little inexperience maybe showed up there, not being able to rest, and the Champions League hurt them. Having to play so many minutes, trying to protect a 1 goal lead versus PSG probably killed their legs as well. And the only positive here is after this FA game, maybe they win, maybe they lose, but it'll only be FA Cup action where and maybe not even. Maybe FA Cup will take over league spots. So after this, you won't really have to play multiple games in a week. It'll only be 1 week football. So maybe that can be a way to kind of get the legs back. Because I just think they're running on fumes. Um, Quality wise, they're good enough to still get on a run. Ishak and Callum Wilson are both on like 10, 9 goals each. They're both gonna be 20 goal scorers, if they're able to stay healthy. So I mean, and then Anthony Gordon has been a spectacular player for them as well. Trippier would be a perfect example of someone that was overplayed, not just physically, I think mentally. And he really had a rough December. And And maybe it worked out how not having to play versus Liverpool, but that forced them to play, Dan Burn for a couple of these games on the other side, because he had to play Livermento at least versus Liverpool. And Dan Burn should not be a fullback anymore. Not for a team that is not for Newcastle side that is trying to have a little bit more ambitions than they've had in the past. Dan Burn can be serviceable maybe as a bench option, but I don't think I thought you saw Nottingham Forest target him, and I thought you saw Liverpool target him. Um, so maybe they can find a way. I mean, they have Livramento, they have Lewis Hall. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see about that. Maybe you can find a way to just change up the playing style where you're not trying to be like Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, trying to win the ball back at high energy. Maybe you're trying to actually soak up pressure and just kind of defend. Maybe you try to play off the counter a little bit. I can't really say. I do fear a little bit for Eddie Howe, because this could really crater on them, unfortunately. But that'll be something that we speak about next week. And so that is the show. And thank you for tuning in. Been away for a bit. And like I said, I teed it up for what we'll be speaking about. Next episode. So until then, you stay squatting and stop recording.